that name, by the way. I'm not sure I've ever told you that, but I think it's really, really cute.
Oh, thank you.
All right, we should probably get off the baby talk and get to a real business. So thank you all for joining us today. As I say every time we meet, this senior work is particularly important to me, just given the demographics of our community. So really glad to have everybody on the call. We're going to start by doing introductions, and just to make it easy for everybody, I'll just call your name out if that's okay. So I will start with my partner in crime, Lori.
Hey there, I'm Lori Fleming, Jefferson County Community Health Improvement Plan Co-Executive Director and Project Director for the Behavioral Health Consortium.
And I'm John Nowak. I'm the other Co-Executive Director for CHIP, the Community Health Improvement Plan. Janice?
You're muted, Janice. Oh.
Yeah, I was chasing my mouse. Good morning or good afternoon, and thanks for the invitation. I'm Janice Housen with the Olympic Area Agency on Aging, and I'm a contracts manager.
And Dunya?
Hi, everyone. I'm Dunya. I'm at Jefferson Healthcare. I work on population health.
And Jody?
I'm the Director of Contracts Management and Planning for Olympic Area Agency on Aging. And the one thing Janice didn't mention is that she works on family caregiver support contracts as part of her work.
Jody, we're really glad to have you today. I know you're really connected with this topic, so it's really great to have you here today. Anna?
Anna McHenry, I'm the DD coordinator, and I also staff the 1/10 of 1% fund.
And Chief Olson? We're not hearing you, but you're off mute, so I'm not sure. No. All right, we'll come back to you. Laura?
Laura Cepoi, the Executive Director for O3A.
And Chief Black?
Brett Black, East Jefferson Fire Rescue.
Heidi?
Heidi Eisenhower, County Commissioner, District 2, and I'm on many committees with some of you, and I am glad to be here.
Thanks, Heidi. Miranda?
Hi everyone, I'm Miranda Nash. I'm the Mobility Operations Manager at Jefferson Transit.
And Nancy? Seem to be, Nancy, you're muted if you didn't know that.
I'm sorry, I'm off. Nancy McGonigal, I'm a SHIBA volunteer in Jefferson County. I've been doing this for about 10 years. And worked with John on other projects.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for being here. Kind of a full agenda today, and need to continue to make progress on our framework. We'll talk about that later, but with that, we're gonna go ahead and proceed. Lori, do you mind putting up the slides? So here is our agenda for today. We're going to start with some foundation setting. I didn't see Susie on the call, so Laura, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to pinch hit, or whether Janice can do that. Anyway, I'm hoping you guys can kind of help us out with kind of what's available in terms of caregiver resources. And then the main focus. Go ahead.
Laura will be able to do that as well.
Yeah. Main focus of the meeting is going to be going over the draft framework and trying to move that along. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about next steps for that. I may try to slip in another discussion, which is several of you were on a call on Wednesday with the OCH about care communities, and I wondered if it might not be a good topic for us to just talk a little bit about that meeting and what content was there. So I might do a short introduction after our foundation setting and then let others add to that. Any additions or questions about the agenda? Okay. So kind of some foundation setting about caregiver resources in our community. Laura, do you mind kind of starting us out on that conversation? Are you willing to do that?
Well, I feel like since Janice is the one who manages the contracts, do you want to start out? Oh, well, okay. I guess we have several programs, and it can get a little bit on the complicated side because we've got our state-funded programs, we've got our older Americans Act funded programs, and then we've got our MAC-TOSOA programs. So we've got a couple of different programs that all lead in. For the most part, most folk come through the door through our information and assistance, and they are looking for that front door. What's the easiest way? I'm stressed out. How do I get support? So for those folks who are 55 and over, they're raising usually grandkids, but it can be others. It's kinship caregiver support. We have a cap at it in terms of just the respite part, but providing caregiver support, there's a lot more other categories than just respite. People say, I need a break, I'm freaked out, but we also are trying to address the heart, the soul, the spirit, the depression. What happens when when you're taking care of a spouse and you've been married for 40 years and now all of a sudden you're doing bathing or you're crossing some of your gender roles and you've lost your role in the relationship. It's been taken over by another role. And that kind of depression and that kind of isolation and loneliness can really, it's a real impact of folks' mental health. Janice, you really support a lot of these programs that talk to the holistic nature, addressing the whole person beyond just respite. Can you please step in?
Absolutely. Thank you, Laura. And you guys, thank you for the invitation. I'm afraid I find myself a bit unprepared. I wasn't really aware what the meeting was about, but I am very happy to speak about some of the work that I do for family caregiver support programs. It's twofold. First, with the Older Americans Act dollars, we have the ability to help the caregivers with some services for their wellness. And I love how Laura captured it. It's really a total wellness and healthy being. And some of the more common family caregiver support services that are supported by the Older Americans Act really is a lot of counseling. I would say that's about 80% of the services that that I see, and that come in on the invoices for this particular program and funding stream. Secondly, massage therapy. That's something that I think is wonderful for us to have the opportunity to provide our family caregivers. There's also other services available, and those could be even some chiropractic care. It can include maybe some fitness and exercise training. It really kind of is kind of broad depending on what the caregiver needs. And I think we recognize that everyone knows what the sandwich generation is. So what we find is that not only is the caregiver trying to take care of their loved one, but they're also caring for their family as well. So that's a lot of time spent caring for others. So it's important for their self-care. Now I'm going to kind of switch and talk about a different funding stream that we have that is through the Older Americans Act, but we refer to it as our Title 3D. And that funding stream is for specific evidence-based training. And evidence-based, many of you probably get that. The evidence-based approved trainings, what we're really excited to have for caregivers is many of you may have heard of the powerful tools for caregivers. And that is a training that is about, I want to say it's about 5 days, a couple hours over a 5-day period of time. In our research, we found just recently, which I'm really excited about, we found a much more robust training for caregivers, and it's called stress busting for caregivers. And after this meeting, if anyone wants any more information about that, please email me, because I'm very happy to talk about it and direct you to how to learn more about the program. So again, just kind of reiterate, 2 different funding streams for the Family Caregiver Support Program, that's Older Americans Act. This is for counseling and therapy, just really direct one-on-one services for that whole wellness of that caregiver. Secondly, is the funding stream through Older Americans Act for evidence-based training programs. And these are programs that caregivers can sign up and take. And again, what I love about these programs is that it's really about the self-care for that caregiver who is really sometimes sandwiched between caring for their own family and their loved ones. So I'll turn this back over to you, John. But if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to entertain them. And if anyone wants follow-up information, send me an email.
Janice, can I ask you a quick, I'm just curious, I know I get to look at your survey that you guys do of, seniors in our community. And I think I have this right. My recollection is that the #1 thing that people feel like they need help in terms of services is like lawn care and, help around their house. And I'm just, well, I guess first of all, am I right in remembering that? And second of all, are there services that are available to people for those kind of services? And it looks like maybe Jody, you.
Yeah, so that is true. The biggest need that people have in the past voiced is the need for chore services and also transportation. In Jefferson, we have the fabulous Echo services that are providing transportation primarily. We don't have as many chore services that I'm aware of in the Jefferson region. And actually, even the agency, there is an agency that is trying to begin to expand some of their work into Jefferson Catholic Community Services. They encounter problems because it requires having the volunteers that want to do chore services as opposed to take people shopping. But chore services is often helping with cleaning the house and helping with yard work. Yeah, Susie, you know this better than most.
Well, in Clallam County, excluding Forks, OLICAP runs chore services. But, again, it's also the same situation. There's limited number of volunteers, and transportation is often difficult. And I think it's less demand for gardening services than it is for chore workers, keeping the house clean. And, because family caregiver support respite care has the component of needing some kind of personal care in order to get respite care, You get housekeeping as a bonus, but that would not be the primary driver for you to get respite care hours under the Family Caregiver Support Program, nor MAC to SOA for that reason, for that matter. So chore services is in demand, but there's limited volunteers. So it's just what it is, I'm afraid.
All right. Oh,
So-
Laura, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, so part of the goals that we're trying to do, I mean, what the state wants us to accomplish with some of these programs is to, you know, provide the right services at the right time, to expand person-centered choices, to support unpaid family caregivers and individuals to avoid institutionalization. You know, people, especially on the peninsula, people value their freedom. They don't want to be mucked and mired and all that stuff. People value their independence. And so it's really important that we do that. So what we're trying to do with these services is to delay or avoid the need for more intensive long-term care services. So there's a lot of these values. And again, there's a lot of ways to address it. And we really do want to address the whole person. And so when we look at what are the results for supporting family caregivers, it's not necessarily a transactional relationship between we're going to support them by giving them X number of hours of respite. It might be we're going to help them realize some of the emotional stuff. We're going to help them with maybe an environmental modification. So maybe they might be hurting themselves because you might have a petite wife trying to, you know, assist her burly husband off the toilet. Well, maybe if there was toilet risers and some grab bars, which is a simple modification, that's kind of stuff that we can help support the caregiver so there isn't so much stress, at least with toileting or whatever it may be. So anyways, we are open to more questions. I don't know if we've addressed everything you all want, but tell us.
Looks like Lori has a question.
I do, and I want to take advantage of the fact that we have Tom Olson and Chief Black here right now. So if we could set down for a moment the conversation on the elder care piece of it, on this piece of it, I wonder if we could talk a little bit about something that Dunya and some of the other folks were talking about at some of our other meetings about the challenge around 911 services being used in a, you know, in not an ideal fashion, and how we can make more efficient those resources and make sure that the folks who are calling 911 now get their needs met, but maybe not through 911.
So how can you let 911 know how to refer? I mean, we get referrals in Forks. I get referrals from the hospital district, whether it's the clinics, one of the 3 clinics, or directly from the hospital for services. Olympic Medical Home Health makes referrals. But if 911 doesn't know who we are and how we might be able to, lessen the number of frequent flyers with 911, maybe that's an outreach that we should make sure exists.
Outreach, I think Janice has been working with some of the paramedics down in Pacific County. Did you want to maybe talk about some of the strategies you've talked? Oh, I'm sorry, Lori.
Well, I think Chief Black actually had his hand up first, so let's go to him and then I'll go to Lori.
Yeah, I think the awareness of what referral services are available is really important. That is something that we are a little blind of in the 911 setting. We certainly do get the frequent flyers. I know there are federal dollars out there that fire departments are using to create a treat and refer program. It does have to be supervised by a medical program director. Luckily, I happen to know one that's very well qualified.
Good one.
But it would need a real concise plan. It can't just be, we're going to refer you to, you know, Bob's Bagel Shop and, you know, massage therapy type thing. It's got to, you know, it has to fit also in our Mercy Records, digital records platform as well, which is not unsolvable. There are fire departments in our county and adjacent counties doing it. I think Clallam 3 has a treat and refer program. But I think there is, not that money should ever be a motivator, but the intent of the treat and refer is actually to keep the low acuity or no acuity patient contacts out of the EDs, out of the emergency departments, and to not necessarily eliminate the 911 call volume, but to reduce it and to hopefully establish the risk reduction model to these people that are living at home and have some needs, but really don't know where to go to get them other than call 911. I don't know if law enforcement has the same cost recovery metric that we do, but I know that we have that ability.
I wonder if.
Go ahead, Lori.
No, please.
I think this might be a good time. You know, there was a great discussion on Wednesday about community-based care that actually, I think, you know, discussed a care model that might address some of the issues that Chief Black was talking about, and their numbers, their statistics about the decrease in 911 calls and trips to the emergency room was really dramatic. And you know, so I think, to me, that's a model that we at least need to take a look at and determine whether that could be helpful in this county. And I'm wondering, I know Jody, you were there, Dunya, you were there. I'm not sure if any others were, but I think it would be worth at least talking about what we saw at that session. So any of you that were there, if you want to add to that, I'd appreciate it.
So I'm happy to talk about it because I've been involved kind of for a long time with OCH and with that particular program in Clallam. So it combines a paramedic, a social worker that is part of the free clinic or funded through the free clinic, and a number of different grants, but they work together. And the police department and the North Olympic Health Network clinic, and they actually staff meetings, regular meetings about clients that or individuals that they are working with. And the example that they gave in the presentation was just a perfect one. It's sort of one of the kind of client that we see all the time. So it's a gentleman who is living in a really terrible trailer with no heat and no water, and almost burns it down a couple of times, and it's kind of filled with trash, and he's climbing over this to get to things, and he's had a lot of emergency room visits, and he's not all that easy to work with, so he becomes a challenge for anyone that's interacting with him. But what they did is they regularly talked about it, and over time eventually got that gentleman into an assisted living facility that he chose to go to. I mean, initially he wasn't going to leave his home. That place was his home. But eventually he chose to move there, and it was because, you know, what they would meet and talk about. I got a call from him this week, and they have signed HIPAA agreements between all participating parties, so they are able to share information. You know, they'd ask Dan Montana, the paramedic, can you go out and visit him again? And so Dan would make a visit to him and talk to him a little bit more, and, you know, just make him feel safe, that somebody is there caring about him, and not just making, you know, this visit that they are making because he's making a 911 call, but, you know, someone that he knows, they know him. Lori and John, do you want to add more to that, or Dunya?
Dunya would be a good person.
So what I would add is that whenever Chief Lukowski was here, we had talked to the Health Commons Project about something similar to what Clallam is doing, but we were looking at the Kittitas County Health Model, which the Clallam model is based off of. And so we had conversations with them as well. And actually the paramedic component, which is one piece, so Dan Montana's work is one piece of the broader sort of coalition that they've created, is really what came out of our our elder care conference, our regional convening that happened in October of 2019. As the huge need for the elders in our community, that's what they wanted to see, was starting looking at some kind of community paramedicine program. And so I don't know if something like this would be the potential of a focus for CHIP that could bring in all of these different aspects. It would actually potentially touch all age groups. And so I've obviously been part of CHIP since I've been part of this community, but always having sort of all of these different interventions that are a little bit smaller, although they do make a huge impact, as opposed to having one larger intervention for the entire community. And it would take it would be a really, really heavy lift. And as I said on Wednesday, my biggest concern is around HIPAA and 42 CFR Part 2 and all of the communication and the agreements that we would need to have as a community to truly take care of people, not only from the medical side, but the having O3A at the table and saying, okay, I can take care of their diabetes care and we can take care of all their transportation to their specialists in Seattle. But you know what, their spouse is lonely and small and can't do some of that lifting. And how do we get you here? And how do we sort of coordinate all of that care across all of our sectors? Would be super exciting to me from a community perspective.
I mean, honestly, I feel like if there's a goal for CHIP, that's among the most admirable ones that we could go after. I just think it might make a huge difference. And there are some elements of the HRSA grant that we already have that are looking at care coordination in the community that we might be able to fold into that as well. So, you know, I think there's 484 steps to that. We're on step 3 right now. So, but I think it's a really good goal. And that's, if you guys don't mind, I think that's actually a really good segue to start to look at the framework, because that's where we would put that kind of work into it. And I would like to make a little progress. And there actually are a couple things in the framework that we've already referenced in this discussion. So if you guys are okay with that, I'd like to pull the framework up, and at least I spent some time between the last meeting and this one trying to tune that framework up and fill in some of the blanks that we'd already had. So I'd like you to at least look at the work that I did and, you know, kind of give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or see if I'm on the right track. So Lori, go ahead, Lori.
I just wonder, because we have both Chief Black and Chief Olson have not been in this group before, so it might be a little bit amorphous to them what we're actually doing in this group. This group is focused on creating some strategic frameworks. This one is specifically focused on the elder age band. So our goal is to create some concise strategic frameworks that we would work on over the next 3 years, or till we do the next community health assessment, to address things that this group has looked at the data and said, you know, between the data and between our qualitative input, we recognize these are the top couple of things we could really work on as a group of collective stakeholders to address in some collective way. So what you're about to look at is the result of some of that work. And our goal in having O3A here today, speaking about the realm of respite care that they are focused on, was to get a sense of where is there an intersection between perhaps funding that we know is there, O3A's priorities, and where CHIP can support in an infrastructural way of getting their goals supported throughout this realm of stakeholders that we have at this table. John, did I say that clearly? And Jody,
yeah, that was perfect. And I'm glad you did that level setting, because I sometimes forget that we have new folks on the call, and I tend to kind of jump to where we have been before. So thanks for that, Lori.
Can I just add one thing? I want to just add something that Laura and I and Jackie Hoyle, who's the Director of Direct Care Services, have been talking about related to caregiver supports. And that is, don't think of it as respite. Think of it as there's this broad array of services, and sometimes having a caregiver make a call to talk to somebody like Susie, who is one of our direct care staff, and just talk through everything that they're experiencing. Sometimes that is the only thing that they need to feel better or to feel like there's an open door somewhere, and that it's okay for them to be feeling everything that they're feeling, and that there are some services available to them if they want to access them. So I don't want you to completely focus on respite as and this is what we need, because what happens when people call us is Susie will go through listening to everybody, going through a conversation, and sometimes it's not even what they call and say they want. It's that second question or third question that she gets to find out other ways of really meeting their need. It may not be that they want a stranger to come into the house and take care of their person, but that they just want somebody that they know they can call and talk to periodically when they're freaking out.
Thank you, Jody.
Or they might need, we don't have care aides, so we're in a bad position. So maybe perhaps we could supply Meals on Wheels in the interim till we have care aides. Many of them do want a break, but it's not a big break. It's 8 hours a week. It's capped out. So it's, it's truly a Band-Aid, but it does alleviate some pressure for the unpaid family caregiver. And, we used to have powerful tools for caregivers classes out here. Most of the people in this part of Clallam County are not computer savvy, so they can't do stress busters online. They just aren't able to do that for the most part, at least in this part of the West End. And there's certainly, it would be great to look at a continuum of care. And that is like, that's a big lift. It's a really big lift.
So this is the aforementioned strategic framework, and what I tried to do is basically make the changes, fill in the blanks on some of these things, and the changes that I've made are in red. And so the first one is at the goal level. Our original goal said determine and address gaps in the current system to support county seniors aging well. And, we wanted our goals to be smart, that they had, definite kind of goals and dates associated with them. So I changed it to say, develop and implement a plan that supports county seniors to maintain the highest functional level possible by the year 2023. So that just turns it into more of a SMART goal. I think if it's okay with you, what I'd like to do is just kind of run through this. If there's, something you really need to stop me, but maybe if I can just kind of run through it, and then we can go back and talk about the individual pieces. So the first objective is understand the current environment for seniors, and the strategy and activities that are underneath that are really about engaging people in the community that provide care to seniors in our community to find out where the gaps and issues in care are. And this group has already been doing some of that work, and I think we'll have a good head start on that. But that's, really the focus is to understand what the current environment is. The second objective is to support existing plans and systems that strengthen senior services. And the strategy underneath that too is improve access to social services through coalition building. And a question I have for this group is, I think Lori and I are both envisioning that, this group would probably morph a little bit, but would continue to meet after the framework is completed to carry on some of this work. And I know we didn't ask any of you to commit beyond getting the framework together, but interested if you guys feel like continuing to have a group that meets about seniors in our community and does some building in terms of collaboration is a good idea, and whether, at least some of you would be willing to participate in that moving forward. And I don't know if we could just take a minute and have people give a thumbs up that you think it's a good idea and that you might be willing to participate moving forward. Lori, maybe you could turn the PowerPoint off for just a second, and we can kind of see if people are kind of in line with that idea. I think I'm mainly seeing thumbs up, so that's awesome. Great. Yeah, and I think that's really, we're starting to do that work in this group already in terms of, you know, understanding what services are out there, understanding what other folks are doing, and, you know, building relationships that can do the kind of thing that Dunya was talking about in terms of, you know, coordinated community care. And Laurie, I think we can go back to the slides now. Thanks for that thumbs up, you guys. I think that's a really strong thing. So I think we can go to the next page, Laurie. So this is still under the idea of supporting existing services. So strategy 2B is around senior housing, and we've been receiving some input in our other groups about housing. That's actually, I think in all 3 age bands, there's discussion about that. But it's, you know, again, this group and Chip would make sure that we partner with existing agencies like the Affordable Housing Committee to make sure that the needs of seniors are well represented. And I think that's the piece that would be important for this group. Is I think there's a lot of discussion about housing for children and working age people, but just making sure that seniors aren't left out of that equation as we move forward. And we do actually have some representation on those groups right now in terms of seniors, but just making sure that that happens. And then Miranda, I'm kind of interested in your thoughts about this. The next strategy is around transportation. And so the data we might want to look at that is what senior ridership for Jefferson Transit. And Miranda, I wasn't sure if you guys had stats about seniors that ride. And I don't, well, I'm just curious to whether you have any data, and in a second I'll switch to you. But
So I don't think I was in the last meeting. I missed it. But and I don't know if that's when we were discussing metrics or anything. But we don't track age. There are things that we do track, like the type of pass, but right now we're fare-free, and COVID has really impacted the type of data that we can collect. And age is not a determinant for eligibility on dial-a-ride. It's a health condition or disability that prevents someone from being able to access fixed route services. So we don't use age as a determinant, and it would be. I think it would be difficult for us to have people bored and be like, hey, how old are you?
Yeah, no,
if you know, you
yeah,
can't really look
yeah.
at people and say, hey, you know, we're tracking, we're marking down, especially visually. You don't want to do that to someone, right?
Yeah.
I think most people feel younger than they look anyway. So I don't know if we can use ridership as a metric in terms of the kind of looking at who's riding, but maybe demographic areas. And, you know, we're actually doing our long range plan, and part of our it's kind of our service standards that we're developing is demographics in terms of, you know, looking at the areas that we're servicing, the percentage of the county versus population that we're servicing. Demographics come into a large play in that. And so what we may be able to look at is, you know, where in the county is the age demographic higher? Is transit servicing that? How can we increase transportation services in those areas? And that can be something that transit internally builds into our service standards as a determinant, and the way we're weighing, you know, if we're planning 2 different service concepts and we're looking at, you know, who's going to benefit the most from the service, what are the how are we comparing it, how do we choose between these? Basically, that's what our service standards come in, and we look at, and we kind of tick off the boxes, you know, where are we getting the most at, who's going to get the most out of this? Who are we trying to serve? And does this service that we're proposing meet that need? So if it's something along the lines of, you know, we want to be able to, you know, have 75% in this region meet I guess what I'm trying to say is that the service will service 75% of the demographic in this area. And if that demographic is at a certain level of an age that we're trying to provide services to, that could be a determinant in why we put service in that area. So it could be retirement communities, senior homes, assisted living facilities. And part of that is also our dial-a-ride service area. So 3/4 of a mile off the fixed route is, that's the standard, that's the minimum amount for our dial-a-ride area. So that's another indicator. Now, and like I said, age is not a factor there. So it is a little bit more difficult when we're talking about how we can, what stats can we use? But I think that using demographics as a service standard is the best approach. I don't know, does that make sense to everyone?
I mean,
Let me know if you have questions.
I agree it's going to be challenging to get that data, and maybe there's not a simple way to do that. Laura, made a comment, which was that maybe we look at people who turn in their driver's license and, are no longer able to, drive themselves. I think what I'd like you to do is just kind of think about that. I don't know if you do any ridership surveys, and if part of that survey is to answer about their age or something like that, but
that could be an option too, where we could do surveys, just asking about levels of service or the things that they'd be interested in seeing, and using the contact information as a way to categorize who's using our services at this time.
Yeah. Anyway, just think about that. I think recognizing that transportation is an issue for seniors and that Jefferson Transit may be part of the solution for that is important to keep in the plan. So let's keep that in there and think about how we might measure that or what we might do to enhance that.
Well, and I also see it says something about seniors being represented on our advisory board. We are accepting applications, so we are openly recruiting for our CAC. So.
And in a month and a half, I will be a senior, and I am on the Jefferson Transit Advisory Board. So
there we go.
We will at least have some senior representation. And I think most of the people on the board are older than I am. But I just thought it was important to say that it's good to have seniors represented in that discussion. So this is the third page. This is again still the goal of supporting existing plans that strengthen senior services. And Lori, I was wondering if you'd talk a little bit about the Washington roadmap for dementia care. I know you know a little bit more about that than I do. Did I surprise you by asking you that?
Well, I would be happy to talk about that, except I don't think that I really do know much about that. That's something that Laura sent me, and
okay.
Jody might, so we'd be happy to hear. You might be muted.
Sorry, you always have to look for where the microphone is because I use like 3 different platforms for meeting. The dementia roadmap, actually, if you look it up online, you can find it very easily. Just look for dementia care roadmap, and it is a really great resource tool for individuals who are experiencing caregiving of dementia or early stage dementia themselves, just to be able to know what resources are out there and things that are happening to them or going to happen to them. There's also now a palliative care roadmap that is available as well. They are available to be able to print as a PDF, and you can also order copies online through DSHS. This tool has been repeated across the country. Laura's probably got one in her hand right now. I've brought them around. I've handed it out to neighbors who are taking care of individuals. It just is really, really helpful. And when you don't get much support for going through what you're going through, talk about an isolating experience. This is one that's really a biggie. So we have, I think we have some copies in our offices. I might still have some. I know I have palliative care copies. And then, so in Jefferson, we have both a direct, direct care office and an administrative office. So we have some stuff in our office. We don't see very many clients, but right down the road from us on the second floor parking lot entry of the building on the first circle as you enter Jefferson is where our direct services are. We're located in the Union Bank if anybody wanted to come and visit.
So I think from a, from a CHIP point of view, that seems like an evidence-based, methodology to provide assistance for the caregivers of somebody taking care of someone with dementia. And, from a CHIP point of view, what we could do is support, making sure that resource is available to people in our community, making sure that people understand about it and that it's available. And, and I think you guys, the OAAA and Senior INA and folks that are doing that work already are in tune with that, but maybe we can help with providing more communication to the community about that.
Yeah, and there's one other thing for dementia care that I just want to mention that you guys may be aware of. But Dr. Rhodes is, he has an ECHO program. Are you familiar with that? Dunya, you know about that? I know that there's one provider in Clallam County who's involved in that.
Okay, let me make a note about that.
It's sort of like grand rounds for somebody locally to become more of an expert in taking care of individuals who have dementia so that patients don't have to go across the water to get care, that they can actually get care here in the area. And so for North Olympic Health Network in Clallam County, there's a physician there who's now able to help with other providers that he's working with in his practice.
And he actually attended our convening as well. There's a bunch of people from his group. Yeah. Super cool program.
All right, Lori, let's go back.
This is the last page.
Okay, so we're on to page 4. So this is, again, new programs. So Sheriff Knoll is not on the call, but he had been talking about an issue that he feels like is a significant issue in our community. And I wholeheartedly agree, since 3 out of 4 of my my elder parental partners have been subject to fraud. So what I added for this one was work with SHIBA and local law enforcement to develop an anti-fraud campaign for seniors in this community. And then I happened to be in the office with Nancy this week, and they have actually quite a bit of information about fraud and about how to do, how seniors can combat that. And I think if we can kind of facilitate getting that out into the community, that could be, a real benefit. So I'm thinking of some kind of a campaign to get that information out to as many seniors as possible. And then
I have a,
yeah, go ahead. Ann.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
I just
that's
wanted
good.
to let you know that the Vulnerable Adult Task Force group that meets, that Dove House convenes, and I don't attend that meeting on a regular basis, but I know Carl Hansen does, and he's on the DD board and the ACAC. They have been working on a brochure about fraud. So it might be good to wrap them into the conversation.
Yeah, that's
Heather is the woman who facilitates that. We applied for an ACAC grant for that because it came up, law enforcement brought that up at our disability forum, but we weren't able to get the grant. So
And Laura,
to put
did you
out
want to add-
brochures and do education and stuff. So sorry. Yeah.
Laura, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to point out SHIBA is part of O3A. It's one of our programs. We just got our funding renewal for the next 3 years. Woohoo. And that is part of the things that were funded in our contract with the state is to provide fraud and prevention, fraud prevention is part of our contract with the state. So
Do you think it would be good to have Chip help with that, or do you feel like, hey, we got it, we're in good shape?
Well, okay, so June is also Elder Abuse Prevention Month. June 16th is, or June 15th is the World National Day that everybody recognizes what we can do to prevent elder abuse. The number one abuse that all elders face is financial abuse. The typical amount that people are defrauded are usually $80,000. So it means that you lose, and this is the way it usually happens. You've got, let's say, an older person, they have a caregiver or they have some new person come into their life. They get them to sign over a mobile home or a vehicle or something. And that's, there's a transfer of title. A lot of older adults do not pursue this and do not report the crime because somehow they feel like that person, because they maybe took them to church every Sunday and they're part of their life and they're part of that connection in the community. So it's a very difficult crime. A lot of the scams are hard to prosecute, so people do lose. So there's a lot of education. I think all of us should have it in our vernacular. I'm glad we have a commissioner on because I think that this is stuff that we should be talking about, that it is Elder Abuse Prevention Month. And what is the top abuse? It's financial. How does most of this financial abuse occur? Usually happens through strangers, and because people, usually for those folk who are lonely and socially isolated, and they welcome those kind of interventions. Anyways, that's way too much information. I'm sorry.
That was great. It sounds like we could maybe help get the word out and, partner with you guys, partner with our, do some advocacy at the leadership level in our community. And
well, this is the kind of thing. And the reason, let me just complete that thought. So that older adult who had, let's say, $80,000 of equity in a home, or they let somebody convince them to take a home equity line of credit on their home, and then they give them the $100,000 they pulled out. Those are the kind of things that put our older adults at risk for losing their homes. This is one of the main contributors to this new spike in older adults losing their housing, because somebody's taken a line of credit that they're now held accountable to. So this is where it gets really mired in, and it really affects their safety and the course of their life.
All right.
Sorry.
Lori, I think we just have one more and we're coming to the end of our time anyway. So let's just take one last look here and then talk about next steps. So there was an item on there about community risk reduction. And I was just curious, I couldn't figure out what that was getting at or where that came from. So I wondered if somebody who had put that out there could tell me a little bit more about what that meant.
So that was in when Dunya first gave the presentation of the overview of what happened at the senior convening, or at the convening focused on elder care. One of the things that was that had come up out of that was community risk reduction. And I think that actually might be where we started to have the conversation about, is it community paramedicine? What way can we address our challenge of having a lot of people calling 911 but don't really need 911 services, but that we want to connect them with the appropriate level of service.
And that I'm noticing isn't in here, to have that, community connection and potentially community paramedicine. And so let's use that as a placeholder for that. And I can put more in about that as we move forward.
John?
Yeah.
This is Nancy. I just have a comment, and I'm not sure this is entirely appropriate, but you know, we're talking, there seem to be a lot of wonderful resources on different tiers, the caregiver and so on, and the programs as far as protection from fraud. But how does that information get to the seniors? You know, the awareness of the seniors, because that's where I see, you know, and just in what we do, and I'm just, you know, I've just worked with the people, is they aren't awareness of the resources. And then we have wonderful people like Susie and so on, who are great resources, but we, it's a real issue with the seniors, and I've talked, and I've always been able to get help within the program, but people, you know, literally crying because they don't know where to go and they don't have a place. And so my concern from my point of view is, all this is great. How do we bring it down to the level of people who really need it?
Who are isolated in their homes.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, Nancy, and I think that's that comment about a campaign. That's what I was hoping to do, you know, through multiple methodologies, raise community awareness about the issue of senior fraud, and then also provide people the materials to help them to prevent that from happening. And, you know, again, I think we have a long way to go, but I think, you know, doing some kind of a campaign that involves, you know, the media outlets in our community. And I recognize that there are a number of people who don't have internet, especially in the senior group, that don't have internet access, or, you know, don't get on computers. So I think you have to look at, you know, newspaper, radio station, you know, whatever opportunities you have to get the message out there. But I think the biggest part of this isn't getting the material together, because it sounds like a lot of agencies already have the material. It's getting the materials out to the people that need it. So I'm sorry we're at time, so I want to cut us off and just kind of talk about next steps. So we basically have 2 more meetings before Lori and I have kind of self-imposed August as our date to finish this. What I would like to do, with your permission, is I will send this out today before I go home to this group, the framework that's on the screen right now. I would greatly appreciate you adding any comments or thoughts about the framework between now and our next meeting. I think Lori's and my goal is to have the framework pretty much finished at the next meeting, and then in the August meeting start to talk about who might be responsible for the activities that are on the plan, and make sure we assign some responsibility. So I know that's an aggressive time frame, but I do think I'm really proud of the work that's been done already, and I think we're a long way down that road. I think there definitely is some tuning left to do, but I think we have good bones right now, and we just need to put a little bit more on the skeleton to move it forward. I'm just gonna, if anybody has a really important parting comment, raise your hand. Otherwise, Lori.
I just wondered if I could get to hang on to this phone call as we're ending the meeting. If there was a chance I could get Dunya and Brett Black to stay on with us for a second. Thank you.
I've got another meeting, so I'm going to have to sign off. But
thank you.
On the right track. Is this feeling kind of like we're sort of hitting the mark? Good. Okay. So I'll send the framework out. Please send me any feedback between now and the next meeting. You know, we're in this kind of final tuning stage, so feel free to edit very liberally, and look forward to seeing you guys in a month. All right. Thanks, you guys.